A wise man does not blame the world for his own failures, for a wise man knows that he cannot change the world, only himself. Ladies and gentlemen, around the end of the year 2023, I released my new game Shall No Legends 2, a game that I've been working on for 5 years. It didn't succeed, in fact, it flopped. And since I had spent 5 years working on it, it made me sad. One could even say that it bummed me out. Until I found out that Concord had 8 years of development put into it. In the year 2018 and 2019, I released my first game, Shall No Legends. This game did really good. It sold over 100,000 copies across all platforms. This part is very important. I released my games on PC and consoles. And more than 90% of my sales comes from consoles and not Steam, keep this in mind. Shall No Legends 2, on the other hand, has not done so well compared to its predecessor, regardless of platform. Here is the first 3 months comparison for Shall No Legends 1 and 2. These are the first 3 months sales from the 4 platforms combined. Now, as I have pondered to why my sequel failed, I came to 5 conclusions, or reasons. The market, art style, protagonist, numbered sequel, detachment and delay. Now, just like I said in the quote at the start of the video, I personally prefer to blame myself when it comes to my problems instead of blaming the world. This, in my opinion, is healthier because I can change myself, but I cannot change the world. I'm gonna try not to turn this video into a self-help video about stoicism, but in all seriousness, if you blame external things for your problems, you're going to be less successful, because you will have to spend your resources fixing external problems. And when we look at the list of reasons, you can see that only one of them is me blaming the world. The rest of them are my own fault. So, let's start with blaming the world and get that out of the way. In 2018-2019, when I first released my first game, on Steam the market was super saturated and we were getting somewhere around 30 games released on Steam per day. But on consoles it was more like 30 games per month. This was of course much easier to compete with, especially on Nintendo Switch, because the platform was new around that time, which means that not only was competition easier during the release window, the total number of games on the whole console was also fewer, so post-release window I still had a lot more visibility. But 1/2 of a decade later, and things have changed. Now we're getting somewhere around 120 games released per month on consoles. And Steam is of course a bloodbath when it comes to its algorithm. In today's market, if you do not have outside influence, you will not succeed on Steam. But on consoles you still have a decent chance. I believe that my sequel would have performed better if it had been released half a decade ago on consoles. But not by much. Maybe it would have done 10 to 20% better. When I put the first game on sale in today's market, it does pretty well, so I don't think the market saturation is to be blamed. No, the real blame goes to... If we are to compare these two games in terms of features, you will see that the second game is superior to the first game in almost every way. I spent a large amount of time working on the quest system, leveling up system, all the cosmetic hats and much more. But none of it matters if the first appeal is not there. Many have cited that Shall No Legends 2 does not have the appealing art style of the first game, and the sad part is that the effort that went into achieving this art style was actually 3 times higher than this art style. I went with this art style because I wanted to explore new heights, and I wanted to do 3D, but 3D was more challenging than I thought. And the main problem was character design and rigging the animations, not to mention the animations just ended up looking lame and slow in many cases. Achieving this art style was definitely not a one-man job, especially that I refused to use store-bought assets and I wanted to make everything myself. In the end, I did swap some of the assets with stuff from the asset stores, but this was done on the last year, so it didn't exactly save me any development time. I did the opposite of what other devs would do. I made assets myself and then I was like, no, that doesn't look so good, and I replaced them with other assets. And that kinda defeats the purpose of the asset store. I love orcs. I think they're pretty awesome. And I know many of you love orcs too. But there is a reason that Blizzard added Blood Elves to World of Warcraft back in Burning Crusade. The Horde side had a lower population in comparison to Alliance, and the Horde races were ugly in comparison. For every person who says that they would love to play as an orc, there are 5 people who would disagree. This is definitely one of the reasons that people chose not to play my game. I even have friends who have straight up told me that they would not play the sequel because of this reason. The truth is that I kinda knew this would happen, and I still went with it. The reason is that from a lore perspective, it had to be this character. I couldn't do this in any other way without breaking my vision, and this is a difficult truth that those of you with a narrative mindset needs to understand. Creative vision is what you want. Marketing is what the people want. And these two don't always go well together. When you make a sequel and it has a number in it, you're dividing your potential audience into 4 groups. Group 1 played the first game, loved it, plays the sequel. Group 2 plays the first game, hated it, doesn't play the sequel, or decides to give you another chance. Group 3 never heard of your first game, plays the sequel and potentially also the first game. Group 4 never heard of your game, gets intimidated by the fact that they have to now play multiple games, decides not to play your game. This has happened to me personally many times. And this question shows up a lot when it comes to games with numbered sequels. When people see numbered sequels, they feel like they have to dedicate too much time and/or money into another franchise, and this can be a reasonable barrier of entry for a lot of people. I don't know what percentage of players do this specific thing, but I believe that one of the reasons that big franchises have avoided using numbered sequels in recent years might be because of this. Because the players who have already played your previous games already know that the new game is part of the franchise. Doing it without numbers doesn't change anything for them, but it is perhaps an easier way to get people who have never heard of your franchise to play the game and get their foot in, before you throw the rest of the franchise on them. But this might not always be true. After all, Witcher 3 has performed way better in comparison to Witcher 1 and 2, combined. And this is a franchise that features save file migration. During the development of this game, I was detached from the world. I did not communicate with that many people and I did not receive much feedback. I feel like the mistakes that I did with this game could have been avoided if I had more voices criticizing me. As a game developer, you need to constantly seek improvement, and although I was improving during these years in terms of development skills, I was not improving in terms of marketing and communication. The bigger issue was that this was supposed to be a 2 to 3 years project. But instead, it became a 5 years project. And this may have led to franchise detachment from the player base. After all, there is a 5 years gap between the releases of these 2 games. For a bigger franchise, with a lot of nostalgia, this is not a problem. But for my game it is. A good number of players who played the first game probably didn't even recognize the sequel. Another thing is that the success of the first game made me overconfident. The truth is that you don't really learn that much from success, you learn from failure. Because of how well my first game performed, I was under the impression that the sequel would do the same. I was wrong. Today I'm working on a game that is both 3D and 2D. And maybe if Shannon Legends 2 had been done this way, it would have been more successful. And maybe the orc character would have looked better if it had been done in pixel art. I learned a lot from my failure. And a lot of that is being reflected into the development of my current project. Unfortunate that failure did not come to me first. The success of my first game proved to me that success is possible. And building my upcoming game on the aesthetics of the first game is the equivalent of following the recipe for success. I don't know where my game development journey is going to take me in the future, but this 5 years chapter is definitely going to stay as a reminder of what not to do. There are many other lessons I've learned from my mistakes, which I've made many videos on, and I will make a couple more videos in the days to come. So make sure you subscribe to this channel. And if you want to know how to make a game fun from the very start, watch this video next. Thank you for watching.